All right, so we're here again for our fourth meeting of this Curious About Self-Directed Education and Unschooling. A number of us have been here before, but there's a lot of new faces. Actually, currently there's only, I guess, 3 to 4 of us who have been here before. The Howard family, Ernesto and Rachel, were here the last time, Cassandra and Nicole. And it's really a conversation about curiosity in self-directed education and unschooling, but it has sparked some action that I think I want to take. So I kind of want to talk about, do we want to keep this as a sort of curiosity space, or are we trying to be supportive of the different actions that people are trying to take? So I'll turn it over because I think Rachel was going to explain who her friend was and how that came to be, and anything else that's been going on in their family in terms of what action they're looking at, I guess, going forward.
Sure. Well, thank you, Nicole. Appreciate that. I don't have a lot to add in here, just that my friend Carla and I have been homeschooling since the beginning, and then my 2 boys are on this call as well. So Carla has one in high school and one in elementary, and so we've had this conversation now for years of the traditional model is breaking down for our families, and it's just not working. And we're still kind of doing the square peg in the round hole and, you know, hitting all the wickets and checking all the boxes. But both of us have been sitting here saying it's just not fitting our kids. And so I felt very encouraged meeting you through the podcast forum and all the different videos and information you've been sending me, because we know there's a way to do it different. As homeschoolers, we've never had our kids in the school system truly, but you still tend to reproduce school at home in a certain sense. You still do it very differently, but especially high school, it's check the box. I've got to have my chemistry and my biology and all the things that the system tells you you've got to have in order to make your child college bound. So the goal is to get them access to university, wherever that may be, but how do you also do this credits for them and produce a portfolio of sort so that in a university setting, your child is a competitive or desirable student. So where I sit is, how do we not check all the boxes that the system has said, this is what you must do something completely different, self-directed education, but then document that and present that in a way so that we can move forward and say, well, my child didn't do this, but we did do this, so take a look. And that's just kind of where we're sitting, and knowing that the traditional system doesn't work for most kids. And so we're trying to define it, but also kind of keep that safety net of knowing that they're still going to be able to participate, you know, in higher education. And so and there's a lot of homeschoolers having this dialogue right now. So I feel like I can't bring them all to this platform, but I can share with them.
One caveat, so we are both from military backgrounds, and that does give you some flexibility in terms of where you pick residency and all the other kind of smaller nuanced things. Just kind of keep that in mind as well. So now that we're both retired sets of families, we have sort of settled down, if you want to, I put air quote that one. But that's kind of the background, if you will, military families, and they do have a little more flexibility to be able to potentially homeschool as well.
Yeah, and just so to clarify, on one of the last meeting where Rachel and Ernesto were here, they mentioned world schooling. And so I had something to share, specifically an email I had received on that topic. So I shared that in just a direct message, which I tend to do things more publicly. But those are the kinds of decisions at that point. I was like, oh, she's the only one who's said it, but she's mentioning those resources have been helpful. So I might, choose to, and that's the question, do I put out there like a whole nother topic saying world schooling, because it's kind of a different thing. It's a form of, it's definitely much more self-directed, I'm sure, than a sort of homeschooling focus, but, and there are people that, who speak very, leaders in that space, let's say, and that's what I was sending them some stuff on. But to also say to what you shared, Rachel, And this was a decision to sort of talk through at the beginning, because last time we got Joe back here and it was just me, Sophie, and Joe, and we got a good amount of time to understand what he's creating that fits within how schools, I would say, can create more project-based learning and do things more self-directed. We also had Louise here, and that's been sort of her thought process and focus. Kara explained a little bit. I know she's wrapping up some stuff and may not be able to talk as much today, but maybe Stacy, I know she was one of my Pod 5 friends and cohort members, and I mentioned this in the Forward Link community, which is the alumni community after this. And so I just maybe would like to hear, I can't remember if she was an existing homeschooler or curious about it, but just to kind of have a brief on where you stand.
Hi everyone. No, I am not an existing homeschooler. I have a son that's about to go into kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a weird year to start school.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always thought that with my job that homeschooling would not be an option, but then when we're definitely not sending him in person. So then when I was looking at our virtual academy options, they're asking for like 5.5 hours of time per day. And then the research obviously shows that like for kindergarten age kids, you can do homeschooling in like an hour. So then I didn't even realize that. So I'm sort of just in the start of this kind of educational process for myself about what's available or ideal or anything really. But so thanks for including me.
Cool. Thank you. And Catherine just jumped in as well. If she could just, I just attended Akimbo Parents, which Catherine was leading the prompt yesterday. And I just wanted to maybe hear briefly, I'm good together on how we go forward, but I do want to hear just a little introduction. So if Catherine, you don't mind introducing yourself, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Catherine Lynch here. I live in Maryland in the United States. I have 5 adopted kids. I got them when they were teenagers. They're all young adults right now. I have lots of friends who homeschooled and unschooled. I have great opinions of that. I wanted to and decided not to with my kids for various reasons. I am very, very pro homeschool and unschool. I am also pro public education. I think it's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, thank you. We are getting more people, as I said, so as each person comes in, we'll kind of do Kenyon and Braden want to speak? I know that your parents spoke, but I didn't hear a little bit just about, did they freeze? Sorry.
We should be better. I'm the resident genius and favorite child of my parents.
Oh my goodness. We've been homeschooling for...
I pride myself in my humility.
Nice. I can see that.
Many years, so I'm getting tired kind of the box checking too in high school. I do enjoy some of my high school, a lot of my high school, but I do want to do some special things before I go off to college and start doing the box checking in college and stuff. So that's why I'm interested in what my parents are learning and all the stuff that we could do possibly before I go to college and stuff and during my high school years. Because I don't want to just check boxes all the way through high school, be constantly working only for the purpose of high school just to get into college. I want to do some special things too.
Mm-hmm.
And it does too as well. So
I want to learn things that I can apply in my life and that I'm interested in, rather than just like, I find learning's really fun, but it's all about how you learn. And that's really what I'm after, is finding a fun way to learn things that I'm also interested in. And of course, I'm interested in things when they're fun to learn, when you can see how they're applied in life.
Well said. Well said. So the last person that just joined us is Rocky. I met him also yesterday during the Akimbo Parents group. He shared, and I did share this inside our thread inside Pod 6. He shared an episode about, we were talking about raising kids to kind of have financial literacy or to grow in financial freedom. And then he shared this episode, and in there he makes reference to how his daughter Gita had left high school the last 2 years and straight from public high school to self-directed. So I hoped he could share a little bit about that. You there, Rocky?
I am here. Hang on.
Yes.
I was just finishing lunch and taking care of things. I've been on meeting after meeting this morning. And so I just wanted to get that all done. And let me just finish this one thing. All right, cool. So how
Yeah, especially if you just heard, did you hear Kenyon and Braden? So I think if we sort of
so
think
here's my
about what they were
question.
saying and their parents. Yeah.
How blunt do you people want me to be?
I like blunt. Rocky, ramp it up.
Okay. So my daughter is in college right now. She's 20 years old. Somewhere halfway through 10th grade, she came to us and she said she had enough. She was in a private Christian school, classically educated. So my kids were already running pretty much at the top of their game at one of the best schools in the area. The school had changed, and so it wasn't delivering on what they were supposed to deliver the way they should deliver it. She was spending her whole day writing reports, doing work that was essentially useless because she wasn't learning anything. She wasn't getting feedback on how to improve herself. So she'd write a paper, she'd get an A. How do I make this better? Zero feedback. She was tired. So even from an emotional and physical standpoint, she had had enough. So we decided to look at alternatives. What else could we do? And we went to cyber, we went to online, we went to other schools, we went to public, we went everywhere. And we couldn't find anything that we liked. And so the end result was she dropped out, or not dropped out, but she left the end of the year, created her own curriculum, and went out and learned what she wanted to learn. The secret to all of this is you have to look at your state and their rules. The rules are essentially a joke. You can figure out how to do whatever you want and fit it into something and call it an education. In the state of PA, it's pretty much rubber stamped. As long as you can show you've done something, you will. So she went out and she found the best writing class. So so we're on a Seth Godin program, right? So she went out and met Seth. She went to one of his lectures. She went to a full day with Seth called, what was that program called? I forget what he calls it. But it was a day-long lecture, which she could have never done if she was in school, right? Because she wasn't going to school, she got to do adult things. So she joined a program from the young professionals here. They had a philanthropy program where you spent an entire year learning about how people give and creating grants and all of that. She was interested in grant writing. So she got to go hang out with adults. They have the same program for high school students, but dumbed down. So instead of taking the dumbed down version, she took the adult version. She got to go hang out and do Tony Robbins. As a kid, they have a whole separate section for them. So she spent 4 days doing something like that. She's been to see Brendan Burchard, which is high performance habits. She would never have been able to go do these things because she was stuck on the school's timeline and they weren't teaching her anything of any value. She got to figure out what she wanted to do. She figured out the best ways to learn. She took some classes online. She had a handful of classes in person for like college classes in person. So she would get some credits for certain things. And so by the time she got to college, she went in, I think, with about 16 credits. But she had 2 years to really have fun and do what she loved. And it allowed her to grow tremendously. When we went through the college process, we realized that college is just as much of a joke as high school is. All right. You're spending a lot of money and you're getting very little return. And they keep telling you that you have to do all these things. So when my daughter applied to colleges, we went to schools that give merit aid because we wouldn't qualify for need-based aid. She applied to the same school that a bunch of her kids who stayed behind in the school that she went to also applied to. So we got to see the financial aid packages and compare them across everybody. Turns out they didn't care that she did all these additional things. They didn't care that she had all this additional experience. All they were looking at was her GPA. And as a homeschool parent, I can give her a 4.0 and her grade point average, not her GPA and her test scores. So the biggest thing we did for our kids was say, if this test score is going to drive your college tuition costs, you spend all your time cranking out, whether it's ACT or SAT, and get your best score on that, because that's what's going to drive scholarships. When we compared what she did versus what all the other kids did, they all got the same scholarships and they all got the same admittance. So all these things that they tell you matter don't matter, except if maybe you're going to MIT or Harvard or one of those schools where it's really a difference. Otherwise, you have the freedom to do it. Some of the things you are probably going to have to give up is high school sports, but there are club sports out there if that's important to you. So that was one of the things she learned because she joined the Young Professionals group. I said, when you go to Young Professionals groups, go talk to these people who are in their 20s and ask them what they regret most. The answer that came back a lot was sports. They looked at her and go, I can't believe you're here at 16 having these conversations, and I wish we hadn't spent our time playing some dumb game and instead gone out and build ourselves up. So she went to networking events that were all adults, and she would constantly be networking. So she learned skills that are far more valuable than anything they will ever teach you in a classroom. So that was a lot of what she did. Now, learning what the game was, with my son, we had a different plan. So he's a different kid, different plan, different kids. We realized that cranking out college credits was the number one thing for him, because that would save him. He's going for engineering. He doesn't want to do the things she did. He just wants to learn and get through. So my son just graduated high school. He has 49 college credits. All 49 will transfer to college. He took them all at the local community college and the local universities here. Because he took them as a high school student, we paid a dramatically lower tuition rate. We were paying between about $125 to $200 a credit, compared to what he's going to have to pay at Pitt. I forget what the tuition is, but it's...
Yeah, in case you don't know this, Rocky is like a financial expert. That's why he's going into the numbers deep here. It means something.
Yeah, so it's probably about a third to a quarter of the price at a state school. If you're going to a private school, it's a whole different numbers game. So that also required us to pick a college for him when he was a sophomore in high school, because we wanted to make sure that all of the credits transferred in. Depending on where you go, everyone's got their own set of rules. And so we had to figure out, does this work or does this not work for him, and how will they transfer across? And we went out and we visited schools. So like we went to Carnegie Mellon, we went to MIT. I will tell you that these schools, so let's look at, if you look at Harvard and MIT, any top tier school, it's 75 to 80 grand a year. Times 4 is 300,000 plus. If you're selling a $300,000 product that has no essential value beyond the piece of paper, you've got an amazing marketing department. And when you go on these college tours, you will see that process in place where they are just constantly marketing to you. When you see all the ads that come out and all the stuff that shows up in your mailbox, it's like this thick of, they all say the same stuff. Most places, if you talk to parents of seniors in college, will tell you they didn't deliver. It's a lot of hype. The networking doesn't go on like it used to, I think. or you have to be really intentional about it. So a lot of people say the purpose of college is to network and build your network. The problem is it really depends on where you're going, what your outcome is, and what you're looking for. And so it's important to sit down and figure that out. And it's hard to figure that out at 16, at 15. You have no idea what you want in life, right? So, but you got to at least start thinking about it. If you're going to make an investment of whatever college is, you really need to think about what it is that I want in return for this, because it's unfortunate that college has become so expensive. But there are numerous ways to cut the cost of college and to find better ways to do it. I will tell you, unless you're rich and you have the money to stroke those checks, go figure out how to do it for pennies on the dollar, because there are ways to do it for pennies on the dollar. And that's one of the most important things that you have to look at for doing the college side, and be flexible. And more than anything else, if you give your kids control and you allow them, they're going to come out of college with adult skill. Like everyone's talking about adulting in their late 20s. That's because they never learned how to become an adult at 16. They will learn how to become adults at 16 if you give them the freedom and the opportunity to go do that. So regardless of where you go in life, you will have the skills to take you there just by going outside of the standard process instead of just following the rules, and you end up with grown children instead of grown adults. NEA says 4 C's. I forget exactly. It's communication, creative thinking, collaboration, and I think creativity and critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the 4 C's and build your program to the 4 C's. Forget about everything else. And no school can do that. They all want to do that. They have no idea how. And so what we did was we used platforms to teach the skills. So I coach sports, I coach robotics. We use those programs to put the kids in an adult situation to be able to make those choices. So our robotics team probably raised $40,000 or $50,000. The kids were fully involved in how do we raise this money? How do we write the grants? So like I told you, my daughter went through the grant writing program. She knows what they're looking for and how to write the grants. They were walking in and meeting executives, learning how to sell them on supporting their robotics team. How do I do this? They're walking into meetings with universities, having conversations of how do we as a team partner with you, the university? How do we help you achieve your goals? You can't have meetings in the middle of the day when you're stuck in school, right? So they had the freedom to do that. They also had the freedom to build robots 24/7 because that's what he enjoyed doing, because he wasn't stuck in school all day, right? He had a lot more time flexibility. So it's giving you time and freedom. You just have to be okay to walk away from what everyone tells you you're supposed to do and pick your own path, and do not listen to what people tell you, because you're all here because of Seth. If you go read his Stop Stealing Dreams, everything I'm talking about is the answer to that solution, is how you build that up. So I will answer any questions.
Yeah. And if I can say this, though, I will want to give, and I'm grateful to Rocky because I kind of like tagged him and was saying if him and Geetha could get here, because just by listening to that one episode, I could tell that he had a lot to offer here. And this, the solution to this is to have these conversations. And just so you know, like the thing that I'm working on that has come out of this conversations already is to say, there is nothing stopping me from creating a basically discourse platform modeled in this way for people who want to create their own homeschools, who want to level up their homeschools, who want to do unschooling. So this is what I'm doing. And I see this, and I've said that the structure, I know Catherine was interested in where I was saying the structure of what I would consider my podcast, because I haven't fully created one yet, would be that we have conversations. It's like we're having a live audience for Rocky, a featured speaker, I'm hoping all of you got something out of this. I asked Rachel and Carla if they would take notes during this so that we could really see how we could collaboratively make this meaningful for us, but also share. So just so I don't want to go into deep on that, and Stop Stealing Dreams would be the beginning of that conversation, really looking at it and having people dig into it and talk about that. So me and Rocky just met yesterday, but have so many ways that we think alike. So I don't know if I saw any questions in the chat. What are the ages groups of all your kids? That was, he's
That's
asking
me.
you guys. Yes, thank you. Please put that in the chat. And if anybody has any questions, I know the Howards are the ones that have kids that are in that age right now, but speak up, Braden and Kenyon. Did you get anything out of that? Any ideas? Any questions you have for him?
Well, first of all, I thought it was very interesting. My favorite thing is that you don't have to check all the boxes to get into a college, get the scholarship, and go where you want to, unless, of course, college is centered around and do these other things that other kids aren't doing that interest you. Have fun, still get an education, and be able to go to college. Something like that.
So I will tell you the one mistake we made. I told my kids that they had to go to college. If I started over again, I would have changed the whole system and said, you're not going to college unless you want to totally do it on your own, because it's not necessary anymore. So that's the thing we learned with robotics. So when the kids, so my son must have been around 9th grade about that point. As part of robotics, I took them into university engineering programs, and we're walking around seeing what these kids are doing and what they're playing with. And they were like, I think even a little later, oh, we're going to get 3D printers. And we're looking around going, we already have a 3D printer. We're actually designing stuff and implementing with it, right? Why do I have to wait till college to learn how to use CAD and 3D print? They're doing it in 9th grade. Like, the college can't keep up with the pace of technology as fast as the world can. So if I want to learn social media or marketing, do I want to learn it from a 60-year-old guy at Harvard, or do I want to learn it from Seth Godin? Like, I know what I'm picking. You don't have to wait, and you don't necessarily have to go to college. And now all these things are free online. You can take all the classes you want through edX, Coursera. There's tons and tons of choices. You don't have to follow the path. The reason my son is going to college is he's going for computer engineering. So you have to have the degree.
Thank you. Any other people?
Yeah, I had a quick. That last part that he said is a pretty big caveat, and the only reason I would say that to why college degrees are watered down is for the reason that you just talked about. We felt like we had to go to college. Now, for me, it was a necessity to be an officer in the armed forces. You have to go to college. We've had this conversation a million times. I give different suggestions to guys who are looking about joining the armed forces, but the biggest that is a line in the sand for them. And I was trying to figure out, well, what is it? In the Marine Corps, they don't care what your major is. They just care that you get a college degree. I mean, that's it. So some guys went and got engineering degrees. They were looking post, let's say, Marine Corps for that. And for me, I went to college purely on my interest of learning Russian. And I was like, well, it might be useful, but I just need to check that box. But I used it in a way that I was so hungry as a late blooming college kid that I just took every class that I possibly could soak up there. Came out with a couple majors and minors, which mean nothing to me other than I was in there with all of these great minds. And I do keep in touch with a lot of my college friends and cohorts. I mean, we still get together and collaborate with different things. A lot of them are authors or work in government, and they still reach out to me as a consultant, and I air quote that one, But the last part is, I did realize what the piece of paper is. Again, for where I work now, I had to have X amount of flight hours. But we all know, we sit in the room, and it's about reputation. If a guy is a good guy, right? Because we're not going to get a guy with 3,000 hours if he's has a bad reputation. But I guess the last part I would say is, I'm trying to figure out where that friction point is. Entrepreneurial type things are where I really don't see you needing a degree. And I don't know if you guys have heard that term, intrapreneur, where you're basically that innovator within a company or an organization.
So kind of along those lines, you could essentially, at least in our community college, like starting 9th grade, he could have just started taking classes, right? And then at the end of 11th grade, we probably could have just gone to Penn State local and continued taking some of the other, like we could have figured out how to get out of high school with a college degree without spending a fortune, or at least got a good chunk of it done and out. You do have to think about your major though. If you want to be a doctor, you got to go to college. But your undergrad, that's where the people make the mistake. If you're going to go be a doctor, nobody asks a doctor where they did their undergrad, right? So you just got to think through it all, because those decisions are hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's what I come at it from a financial standpoint and a time standpoint. Those are the two things you give up, money and time. And so you can take a lot of these other classes online. And so in the past, it was very hard to build a network. But now just take one of these classes and you've got an entire Kimbo network. My daughter was part of the Emerging Leaders program that just finished up. And that's why you're seeing a lot of young people show up. They're actually in here building a network of people.
Yeah, and I was saying in the chat that I teach management at a community college, and I've only just started there, like it's my 4th semester coming up, but a friend of mine had done, basically she had to look at the courses, and she had to, write up a syllabus of what she did that was management like, or these different things. So the hard part about that, I mean, she was an adult learner by the time she decided to go get her degree. So I don't know how well they would believe if Kenyon and Braden showed up at 18 and said, I've done all these things. I mean, they'd have, and that's where evidence, but I do think there's going to be more pushback at the college level to try and do that, because they have to adapt. There's been, I don't know if you've all heard of Clayton Christensen, but he talks about how he's been predicting, and I can't remember what year, whether it was 2020 or 2030. I mean, he's like saying the whole college, it's like a housing bubble, like, and the whole thing's just going to crash. And we're really, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, I don't know if it's unfortunate, but it may be here is my point. So.
Well, it is, because they have a major problem. Right now they're saying online learning is just as good, pay us all this money. And then in a year, they're going to go, well, no, it isn't. You really should go to school in class and pay us all this money. At the end of the day, it's all changing. And there are better online platforms than what the schools are doing in the online space. And there's a lot of kids. So we're going into college for the first time for my son. Their kids are saying, we're not going. If it's not in person, we're not doing it. Or they're taking a gap year, or they're doing there is tremendous turmoil in the college industry right now. And everyone's known that it's a bubble waiting to pop. It's just society has to change the way it looks at people who don't have the traditional path. And I think that more and more that is happening. Like Google's starting to hire people without college degrees.
Yep. And I don't know what that process looks like, but if you guys take a look at the Emerging Leaders application, you'll see that, what applications will be looking like. And I've been saying this even to my college students, the only thing that it's going to take is a company like Facebook or some kind of big enough to create a solution for HR managers that makes it easy for them. Because I remember my undergrad was in HR, and this was in the late 90s. And at that time, my recruiting professor said that a college degree is worthless, other than it is the only way that HR managers have to filter people and think that you've at least done that. And we believe that then you could be a good employee. So she flat out said it back then. And so for me at this point, it's if you're not building a portfolio, if you're not doing other stuff, if all you're doing is college, and that's what I tell my college students, if all you're doing is college, you're in trouble. And they're complaining because my class they're at the beginning, they're complaining because my class is structured so differently than any other class. And they're like, why? And I explain that this is modeled after the future of work. And at least by being in here, I know that I'm making you work in a self-managed team. It's all about communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking. And so we're going to see more and more of that stuff.
See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I do that. I have a really unique design. I'm actually trying, I'm debating on whether I should put my college course on Discourse this semester and give it a try as well, because if I think I could turn that curriculum into a similar setup and see. And they tell me I have academic freedom until I ask for something like that. And then they're going to be like, no, it's unproven. And I don't know. And you're new, and we'll see. But I could just do it and hope.
Chat, it's called The Well-Trained Mind. It's especially helpful the younger your kids are, because it will help you think about how they learn in the processes and the things that you can do. And it goes back to the 4 C's.
Ernesto,
Rocky, can you name those 4 C's again? So, or write them in the chat, please.
I could do it if you want.
Thank you.
I did want to turn over. Ernesto, do you want to ask this question or whatever you're saying, or Ernesto or Rachel? One of you said something in the chat.
Yeah. So the big thing that we run up against, again, this is all well and good, and I have felt like this for a long time. I always look at people that are credentialed. That's what we hang things on, right? It's like, well, I'm credentialed, and so therefore I'm an expert, versus a person who has expertise because they've done all of this self-education and they've read into it. That's part of the thing that we have against why we wanted to join the podcast group, is like, how do you just put yourself out there? When does a photographer become a professional, right? When they start getting paid, essentially. And a lot of it has to do with confidence, but really what we're talking about is that you have people who write the requirements. If I were to write the requirement for my job so that I can protect myself, I'm going to put it at a certain level. I need this many flight hours. I had to have attended this school. So you're reaching out against, I think, what is a vestige of what used to be. Do I think that a guy who hasn't gone to college can't lead a team on a battlefield? No, right? Leadership is something that is almost intangible in that sense. You can't go to college to quantify that. But again, it's about what are the credentials for these careers that our kids are looking at. And that's what we're telling them. You want to be this? Oh, you have to go to this college to get this degree or this credential. And I think that's what we're up against, is who's writing the requirements when you go to apply for that job. Again, it's a vestige of kind of what I hate to put it this way, but social classes back in the day. Officers were privately educated, right? Most of them were homeschooled, if you want to put it that way. They hired the best tutors in their homes, and everybody else was put into the other category. I don't know. That's just, I guess, more of a comment, but if you can.
So what do your kids want to do? Do they know yet?
I don't know what I want to do. So
okay.
Other than start a podcast, but I don't know, Braden, you want to say something there?
I'm not exactly sure, like, there's not a specific career path that I'm interested in, but I do know what I'm interested in is I'm very interested in the ocean and in nature, and also in photography and videography. I'm also interested in maybe like blogging and some of the stuff that my parents are into. So really, I think the next couple of years would be educating myself on all of those things and figuring out how to put it into my future career, like create my own thing, because I don't have like a specific path in mind, like a specific career that I want to go through college to get, but I do know all my interests, and I want to figure out, my next few years is going to be figuring out how to put that into something that I can make money off of and that I also have a passion for. So yeah, I don't have a specific idea yet, but that's what I think the next couple of years will be for me, is figuring out how to create something.
Kenyon, what about you?
For myself, I actually have a lot of different things I would want to do. Most of them would just be hobbies, though. I like music. I like making music, listening to music. My brother and I play guitar, and I play piano. I actually have a keyboard under me right now. And I play for hours on end, probably every day. And I've done that since I was little. And that's something that I've always wanted to pursue and will continue to do so. I'm constantly getting more equipment and learning how to put everything together. I want to make music for our podcast. I want to make music for YouTube and just a bunch of different, I love music. And that's really the path that I want to go down. And then I also like speaking, but that's more of a side hobby.
So nothing either of your kids has told me requires a college degree. You just go out and do it. So I'm going to tell you about my friend. He has a website. It's called 10K to Talent. He has 9 kids, and he essentially said, well, you can't afford to send 9 kids to college, right? So he pretty much told his kids that they're not going to college. What he did is, as soon as they turned 12 or 13, is he paired them up with adults in the community to work on the skills they wanted to learn on. So his one son actually edits my podcast. That's what he wants to do. So he gets paid to edit my podcast. He's been doing it since he was 11. One of his kids is a bladesmith. So he makes knives. Now he's gone on to machining and doing other kinds of stuff along those lines. One of his kids flies drones, and he started making money by creating drone videos for real estate companies. And so now he does that, and he's doing other stuff with that. But they've all found a path outside of college, and they're just out learning skills and then taking the next step towards whatever it is their ultimate goals are. But they're essentially self-sufficient at 18.
Oh, awesome. I love that. I was going to say, I did ask Kenyon if he would make music for my podcast, if he didn't see that in my chat there. And I would like to know the young person that's doing editing, because that's the least interesting thing for me in podcasting. And yet it is a skill that I know that, especially with my connections and the community, that you mentioned this kid, and I'm like, I would like that kid right now, because or any other young people who would want to learn that skill and get paid to do it.
So what was the answer?
From Kenyon?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? I don't know. He hasn't answered me yet.
Currently ghosting.
Or he's supposed to be in chemistry right now. They're waiting on him.
See, that's what happens. Other schedules pull it on
Don't
you.
mention.
Nicole, can I say hi quickly?
Yes, please.
I need to go right now, but I really wanted to thank Kenyon and Braden for sharing. I really enjoyed hearing about what you're up to and what your questions are and what your interests are. So know that I'm cheering for you and your family. Rocky, thanks for sharing. I did listen to your episode last night with your beautiful daughter. It was very fun. The only reflection that I'll share is around this question of post-secondary education and what's its value. I have seen in my own experience, there's just so many different layers of currency that you have to discern. And some of that, I know in my own family, it was hard to sit with, I have 4 degrees. My children's father has no degree. it was really important to him that the kids go to university. And there's emotional currency in that, you know, within the family, a grandfather, the teacher. And it's been fascinating to watch. My daughter is 25 and just finished her undergrad. She did it her own way and paid for it herself and worked. And so we've just been doing a ton of cheering. And my son is 19 and he looks to be heading back to university in the fall, where he's studying outdoor education, and he'll be doing that online. So it's just a little bit absurd. But he seems committed to doing it. So I have my own story about education. I'll share it another time. But I, as a parent, part of my role is just to sort of watch and see what's unfolding. So thank you all for sharing, and Nicole for hosting this and putting this together. And I will look forward to connecting again.
There is a lot of that. I will agree. There is a lot of societal pressure. I think it's changing finally. And my daughter's on the train today. She's coming home from college, or actually from New York City. She didn't want to stay home. So she couldn't talk today, but she'll probably hop on next week. So you'll hear the other side of the story, which might be 180 degrees different.
Yeah, that I would love to have her there next week. There was a 16-year-old in Pod 5 with me, and he is got an up and running podcast called 21st Century Visionary. He hopes to make it next week. He's in a boot camp this week with Draper University, so he's trying to pitch a solution to our education problems there. So he can maybe talk more about his vision, which would be really cool next week. Anybody else? We have more time because we usually stay till about 12. So we got about 10 more minutes. I mean, my time.
I was going to say, Nicole, that'd be great. Was his name, was it Kanat?
Sanat Seiko. Yes, he's 17 now. Okay. I did do a podcast episode interview of him that for the podcast that I was working on in Pod 5. I have the name Pick Yourself Project. The intention is for it to be an entrepreneurship venture for young people. It is still something I want to do, but at this point with those beautiful roses in the corner is an elementary school friend of mine named Chriso that I had mentioned to some of you that I was on the phone with her and we got cut off. I said, join us at 12 if you can. And yet, so I have a lot of parents who, you know, people that have been connected to me for, 10 years since Facebook started and see me talking about self-directed education or reaching out. And so, I can't do all one-on-one conversations, but that's where if anybody is interested in sort of helping me think through how to recreate what we have here in a discourse I've reserved createyourownschool.com. So that is the intention of my future, is to help parents, whether it's their own homeschool or a co-op, a group of parents. And I would love any help that anybody's willing to offer me.
Cool. Good. I was curious.
Yeah, I'm happy to help.
Uh-huh.
At least from an idea standpoint, and I can probably over time connect you with people like the person I talked about who has 10K to talent.
Mm-hmm.
It's how to create your own. And there's something called Genius U, I think. Mm-hmm. They're creating entrepreneurial courses. They're extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's connect because I keep seeing it. It's an interest of mine. I don't have enough time to do anything in it. But if I can help somebody, that's good enough for me.
Sounds good. You've helped me today because you're curious, Joe?
Yeah, just for next time as well. I saw Soph was on and then she dropped off. She might have a story there in terms of the transition to college. I believe her daughter she did unschooling for maybe 4 or 5 years and then went to NYU.
Yeah. So the goal here is to try not to like repeat stories that have been on prior like episodes. So she spoke on the first one and she has spoken on others. So, I mean, this was a good thing to wrap up our conversation with because is what do we want this space to be? And at this point, I'll just say the only person left here right now that was on the first call is me. So there is this dropping in and dropping out. Soph, just so you know, she's reached out to me after the second one and said, can we just have a one-on-one, because I want to help you. I see that you're trying to do something and I want to help you do it. And she's really coached me on the side to say, like, how would you assemble what could you do right now? Much like Seth, if you were on the thing yesterday where Seth said, you know, if a kid is drowning, any one of us would jump in to save that kid, you know, and it's like, he's calling it it's basically a lifeguard. But if you wouldn't question whether you were qualified enough, you wouldn't question, do you know are you the best swimmer? You know, what you're going to look like, the mess that you're going to be in afterwards, you would just jump in and help that person. And so at this point, with what I'm seeing, people just on Facebook, like, I am just in a panic about what I'm going to do in the fall. I really don't know. So for me, there is still an interest in this youth entrepreneurship thing, but I am putting that on hold to say, the bigger thing is to say, how do I help parents through this process, which then I'll have an audience of people who would probably be like, let's create this thing together to allow our youth to do all these entrepreneurial things. Like, we can put our minds together and make these collaborative educational experiences together. So, I mean, we can write, I see in the Akimbo parents group, they were talking about writing a book together. We could write a book together. We could do a podcast together. We could do blogging together on these kinds of, to help other people. That all of my vision has always been about collaboration. So that's what this is the beginning of. And yet there is still, you know, people who are curious, you know, do I want to make this still just be, you know, do you feel like you came here curious and you still got what you needed, even though Rocky did most of the talking? I guess that's the kind of question I'm answering, because it went more towards like, almost like a podcast interview, even though I wasn't doing too much question asking, with a live audience, which is a vision I have for the podcast. Does that make sense of what I'm saying? Because this is what happens with the nonlinear thinker. I'll just like, and hope that people follow what I'm saying. So.
Fully following. I think the thing to add here is what I think is most interesting is forgive the metaphor, but we've landed on this beachhead, and you know, we all have different talents and skills and backgrounds, and we're trying to figure out the way forward. I mean, so there's people who want to continue public school education. Their kids aren't going to be allowed to go to school in the traditional way. So, whereas we've been doing homeschooling. And so I think that's why it's important for this. It's obviously been on all of our minds prior to what's going on with COVID, but what I think is interesting is the way forward. People are looking for that. And so it's eclectic, and it is like your mind and my mind is doing the same thing. But I think there is you can kind of neck it down as time goes on, but people are looking at the fall and then the way forward, the whole thing with the SATs that blew up last year, you know. So I think it's the best time for these conversations to take place and for something to be created out of it, because people are looking for it, and they're looking for leadership at all those different levels. So anyway, that's
I would agree with that. I think right now, especially, support is what people are looking for, because we've all some of us have homeschooled, but we're still kind of looking at this college thing going, what in the world? How is the world transforming? And then there's all the people whose kids have been in school. They know that's not going to work. They know they can't implement K-12 at home and all the worksheets and all the things. They don't know what homeschool looks like. They only know how to reproduce school at home. Support is really where it's at. There's going to be so many people asking questions at different levels. There's going to be people entering into kindergarten going, how do I teach my kid how to read? And there's going to be people exiting out of the high school system going, how do I get my kids to college, and everything in between. So it's a dialogue that needs to happen. Support is a huge thing. You guys have brought in the entrepreneurial mindset. And I know, Nicole, you and I have talked about how does that apply to education. That's a great talking point right there, is like, how do we develop the 4 C's and these skills into our kids? And yes, in kindergarten, you need to learn the basics, that, you know, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And you start there, of course, but it is an hour a day at that. And the rest is just exploring the world. And there's so much dialogue that can happen in that realm of just what education is. And then you get up to the upper levels where it's sort of, you really need to get into that rhetoric stage and start synthesizing these abstract ideas and teaching kids these skill sets and entrepreneurship. But anyways, I think support is what people are really looking for right now. And they want to know that if they do it different, they're not going to be alone, that it's okay and it's safe. There's a whole safety net of people. I think hugely, like, I love listening to Rocky, and anybody who's come on here that has some experience having walked through it, we need to hear those testimonials and say, oh, okay, this person did it and this person did it. And, you know, and because we all know that it's true and we all know that it can be done. It's just that you can't see into the future. We don't know what that future is going to look like. So there's the few brave souls who've gone ahead. Testimonials is huge, feeling support and comfort in that. And then putting heads together to kind of design something from out of the need. So I see this kind of multifaceted need. And I'm pulling a lot of things out of this conversation in particular. Like Rocky was saying, what I'm really pulling out of that is what we can, especially with the older kids, is helping them to create, like, to know what they want and really try to hone in a vision on that, so that if they want to go to college, they know they want to be an engineer or a doctor or an officer, you know, or whatever. You know, he had to be, in order to be a pilot, he had to have these certain things. So you steer in a certain direction because but trying to define and curate that for them, because they feel very lost in a world where they follow rules, and then you graduate and it's like, now do whatever you want. They have absolutely no idea how to do that. So we need to have that conversation about, you can do anything you want, but let's narrow it down. Let's figure out what your niche. So I'm hearing a lot of the entrepreneurship. I'm hearing that know what you want, and the network building. That was genius. About this, like Akimbo, this podcast, and networking doesn't have to take place on a university campus. I love that as well. So I know I just threw a whole lot of things out there, but I'm seeing needs on different levels, and I will compile this all into notes. And that might be a way of sorting people. Are you looking for support? Are you looking for ideas? I'm not sure. That didn't really answer the question, but that's kind of what I'm hearing coming through.
Yeah, so I know that like I said, Rachel have had some back and forth, so I appreciate you mirroring back because you were taking notes, and what I heard was we want all of it. And I do, between what you've only experienced, and that's okay, because I think it's possible. What's the point? Like, Pod 6 is a piece, and when you go into Forward Link and you see what that is, what I'm saying is, how do I guide people through, like, the first stages, which is a lot of the creative process of vision of what you want, ideating what's possible, developing, and then implementing. But you do that in community, like we're doing, which is what you're kind of going through. And then yet you can have a whole bunch of other meetups and prompts and all these wonderful things that I've seen happening in Forward Link. So this is my project over the next month, with the hope that I can have something up and running, like a minimum viable product, within like a week to 2 weeks, because discourse is really that easy, I think, for my skills. And if anybody else wants to help me figure discourse out, because it is a little overwhelming because my technology skills are definitely not, the latest and greatest, but I started with technology when technology first started. So I just always have had that, I could figure it out. So I think we're coming up. Oh, we're at time. So if anybody you can stick around afterwards, but I know we like to kind of say goodbye. I'm going to can we do a little wave, and I'll try and do a little screenshot afterwards. Thank you. Okay. See you later.